Hi, I'm Joe from As the Joe Flies.
And I'm Leslie from Trips with Tykes.
And welcome back to Disney Deciphered and part 2 of my summer trip report. So we took the Bright Line down to Fort Lauderdale. We met up with the rest of our family, and then we met up with a couple of other families, our friends that we've cruised with in the past. And we boarded the Disney Magic for a 5-night sailing out of Fort Lauderdale to Castaway Cay, Nassau, Lookout Cay, and then a day at sea. It was a great trip. I'm going to talk a little bit about it. And then, Leslie, since you and I have both been on the Magic class of ships, the older ships, we'll talk a little bit just about the pros and cons of those ships if you're deciding what ship to take. Before we get to all that, we have a few new Patreon supporters. So, Leslie, who do we got today?
So today we're thanking new supporters Chris P. and Brian F. of the DCL Duo, who you heard on the podcast here a couple of weeks ago. Be sure to give them a subscribe as well. So thank you so much to our new supporters. If you want to support the podcast, go to patreon.com/Disney Deciphered. You'll get our unfiltered episodes, trip reports, ad-free listening, Facebook group membership, all sorts of fun extras. So thanks again to everybody.
Indeed. Thank you. Speaking of DCL Duo, we did 50 minutes on Lookout Cay already. Did want to talk a little bit about my experience, Leslie. First things first, have to talk about the flies. There were not that many flies. I was very curious about searching out the pheromone infected places in the island, but decided against it. So there weren't a lot of flies at True 2 and True 2. Oh, real quick tip before I forget. I think I've said this multiple times now, but it should be said. The Magic is a small ship. Lookout Cay is set up for 4,000 people to come from the Fantasy or one of the bigger ships. The Magic only has 2,500. Well, on top of that, when we were there, our head server told us that 1,900 people went to True, which is the main dining place, and then only 400 went to True 2, which is a little bit further and Lookout Cay closer to the adult beach. And then beyond that, there's still an adult barbecue as well. So if you're trying to avoid crowds, maybe it seems like go a little further away and you'll be able to get that. But on the flies, Leslie, you visited Asia a few times. Have you seen they have like various types of fly swatting things? Just Brian and Sam talked about the air moving, and they definitely have fans, but they also now have these, I don't know how else to say it, but like battery operated fans on the tables that spin around that will like chase away your flies. So that was pretty cool.
That's cool. I'm glad they've figured out solutions this quickly, and it sounds like it was more than manageable when you were there.
Yeah, there was only a couple. In fact, if I hadn't known there was a fly infestation before, I would have just thought this is like a normal, there's flies outside when you have a cookout. So, that's just something that happens. The thing that I still would love to see them get is, I don't know, in your travels in Asia, Leslie, sometimes you'll go by these booths where they're just like selling stuff in kind of glass plated things as you're like walking by. And they have these automatic fly swatter things that just move over the food, just creating just movement over the food so flies won't land on the food. I think they could get that for the food that they're serving, because some of the food that they were serving was covered, but the hot dogs and stuff still wasn't covered. So, flies could still get on that and stuff like that. I know everyone came here to talk about flies, so you're welcome for that. A couple of things I want to say is the walk was fine. My son's ankle healed enough, so I ended up not asking for a golf cart. He probably could have used a stroller. Brian and Sam had talked about red wagons. They also have strollers that are there for not rent, for use. Like you can just grab a stroller and put your kid in it if needed, if you don't have a stroller. But what happens, of course, is these wagons and these strollers make it all the way to the tram stop. And then at a certain point, there's none left by the ship. And then same thing on the way back. So wasn't able to get a stroller either way for my son, but that was okay. I got to say, Leslie, Lookout Cay, let me put it this way. There was 3 families there. My family had been to Castaway Cay quite a few times. Everyone else had only been to Castaway once. And then they went to Castaway for the second time on this cruise. And then they went to Lookout. 13 out of 13 people preferred Lookout. The beaches were nicer. There was more things to do. The food was better. Just overall, it set a better, like the biggest drawback for Lookout is everything being so spread out. Not just the walk to the tram, but you got to walk to the tram, take the tram. And then when you get there, that area, the whole area, which is good in a way because there's a lot more beach, but it's it's a lot more spread out, which is why people didn't make it down to True 2 or whatever to eat, because they just stayed by where all the action was. But aside from being more spread out, which was rough on a 90-degree day, but if it's like an 80-degree day, then it's not going to be as painful. That was like the main drawback of Lookout. Everything else I thought was better than Castaway. I guess they don't have a slide or whatever, but still, I think it's better. And Lookout Cay isn't even fully operational yet. The bikes aren't up. There's going to be nature walks, which I would be really into, and I know at least some of my kids would be really into, but those aren't available yet. And so I think a year from now, whenever you get there, Leslie, Lookout Cay is going to be a really cool place to visit. It's great that they have them both, but I definitely think over time Lookout is going to surpass Castaway in terms of popularity.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how this is going to evolve because, like you say, there's more coming to Lookout Cay. At some point, though, if Lookout Cay is sort of viewed as the better destination more universally, I think Disney will maybe invest a little bit more in Castaway. So this is going to be an interesting push and pull to see how this plays out over the next couple of years. So I think it may evolve and shift.
Definitely. The last thing I wanted to talk about from our cruise itself was the Aqua Dunk. Leslie, do you know what the Aqua Dunk is?
I don't think I do because I haven't been on the Magic. I've been on the
Yeah.
Wonder, but not the Magic.
Yeah. So the Magic and the Wonder are the same ship, but somehow the Magic has, I guess it is a ride, a little bit of a ride, a water slide called the Aqua Dunk. Well, Leslie, you basically just climb into this hyperbaric chamber, what feels like a hyperbaric chamber. You feel like you're going to get cryogenically frozen or something. And then they start spraying water at you, and there's a trap door. They open up the trap door, and you just fall straight down into the slide, and you go. It is wild. So that's why they call it the Aqua Dunk. So it's like a dunk tank, except for you're not even sitting down, you're standing up. What do you think about that, Leslie, that description?
Well, interesting. I am going on the Magic. Well, tentatively, you know this, Joe, but we're hemming and hawing about whether we're going on the Magic at Thanksgiving. So maybe I will get to experience it for myself.
It was a lot of fun. And it had that, like the tension before the drop got me like a little nervous in like a good way. My son did it. I didn't even know this. So I wasn't on the pool deck. And then I came up to the pool deck and my son was with my wife at a table. And I was like, hey, I'm going to go on the Aqua Dunk. Do you want to go? And he's like, I just went. And I was like, oh, come on, go again with dad. And he's like, okay, I'll go again. And so we went up, we like chatted on the way up. We chatted about like the attraction. And then he's like, I'll go first. So he went first. One thing you have to know is you want to bring less stuff up there. Cause like I had to hold my glasses just because like you're dropping straight down. So they want to make sure you don't lose things. Amusingly enough, you don't have to take off your Disney Band Plus, your Magic Band, but I did have to take off my Fitbit. I guess it's because I think it's because they know that if the Magic Band comes off, it's just going to come off. Whereas the Fitbit, like any other band, they don't know if it's like going to tear at your, or whatever. They can't speak to the safety of that. Anyway, blah, 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 blah. We went on it. 2 days later, my wife is like, yeah, he like cried when he got off that ride, right? And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, he got off. He said it was pretty intense. He cried to me for a little bit. And I was like, he wasn't crying when I got there. And she was like, yeah, he had just stopped crying when you got up there. And then you asked him to go. And then I was surprised that he said he would go again. So it's just pretty funny how it is. But the first time I went on the ride, it was pretty intense too. I mean, I'm an adult, so I didn't necessarily cry, but when they do like a 3, 2, 1 countdown before they drop you, and I was like, this is intense. Like I was like, I had a couple short breaths right before they dropped me. So I get it. It's an intense attraction, but it was a lot of fun. And yeah, my son actually loved it. He just had to cry once to process the emotion of the thrills.
The resilience. I'm impressed. So I don't know with this review that we're going to get my son on this. We'll see.
Yeah. It is tough. He also complimented me for not being 300 pounds so that I can ride the attraction. You can't ride the attraction more than 300 pounds. I was like, thanks, bud.
Out of the mouths of babes again. So there you go.
Yes. Thank you so much. So those are the main things. The rest of the cruise was great. I think I am starting to be over Disney's shows, or I really like the Frozen musical show during dinner on the Wish, but Tangled, even though I liked the music from Tangled, for some reason I wasn't feeling it. I mean, it was fine, but I would have rather have talked. I guess I'm getting old. I would rather have talked than listening to music. Although they did play Proclaimers, I would walk 500 miles, which I don't know why is our 6-year-old's favorite song. And so she was really into that. Less said about that, the better, really. And then I played a lot of trivia. I did more adult stuff than I'd ever done before, Leslie. So we played a lot of trivia, got so close, got a perfect score on the Marvel one, and lost in tiebreakers. Four teams total got perfect scores on the Marvel one. So competition was really tight. Hawkeye was first published in 1954, or first made it into the comics in 1954. That's what I lost on. It's
See,
crazy. Go ahead.
See, you and I would be a great team if we could ever get on a cruise together and do trivia, because I don't know like that kind of history. I don't know the Star Wars. I don't know the Marvel, especially not the back Marvel and Star Wars stuff. But I do know the parks, and you and I would be the right combo.
Well, that's the ridiculous thing, because the reason why we got 20 out of 20 on the Marvel stuff, because it was all the movies, and we also had a 14-year-old boy with us. So, that part was easy. And then the tiebreaker question was about the comics, and I was like, oh, I'm totally lost now. And I told you, Leslie, that there was a Disney Parks trivia. The only reason why I stayed in that one, it was like a level 2 trivia. The only reason why I stayed in the race for that one was there were all these questions about Hong Kong Disneyland. And I feel like, we got to get Sean Coomer from Miles to Memories and 20-Minute Travel. The three of us, we could handle all 6 parks around the world and do pretty well in that trivia.
A girl can dream. One day.
Also, still would have lost the tiebreaker again, Leslie. It's 1964, not 1954, for all of you Hawkeye fans who knew that. All right, we'll take a quick little break and then talk about 3 reasons to sail the older ships and 3 reasons you might want to avoid them. All right, Leslie, I'm going to throw it to you first. What is one reason why people should consider sailing on the older ships? Because really what happens is when people want to take a Disney cruise, they're like, what ship should I go on? What itinerary should I do? I don't know, Leslie, I think I mostly just go by itinerary unless I'm trying to try a new ship. I think you're the same way. But if you have some flexibility, what is one reason why you might want to consider the older ships, which are the Magic and the Wonder, the first 2 ships, the Magic class ships?
Yeah, so the reason you should consider those, if you do have the flexibility schedule-wise, itinerary-wise, is that there are fewer people. They're smaller ships and they're not as crowded. I think if I remember right too, Joe, like the rooms are technically the biggest of like all of the ships. They didn't quite figure out how to maximize their profit by minimizing their space on these ships. So you get a little bit more breathing room. And I've always thought, I mean, our family of 4 has been on the Wonder and it's been totally fine. But you do get just sort of fewer people competing for all the activities and the pool chairs and things like that. I mean, of course, everything on the ship on scale is smaller as well, but it does feel like you just get a little bit more breathing room. So just a couple of numbers here. The Wish class ships and the Fantasy class ships are 4,400 people versus the Wonder and the Magic, which are 2,500. So that's a big difference. And if you're looking to escape the parks, you're probably looking to escape the people. And if that's why you've ended up on Disney Cruise Line, that may tip the scales for you.
Yeah, and I mentioned it as well. Lookout and Castaway, they're just so much more crowded with the bigger ships. So it's not just your experience on the ship itself, but if you're going to, one of Disney's private island destinations, then it's going to be much better if you're on one of the older ships. One thing that I noticed on this trip that I hadn't noticed before, just because I hadn't taken advantage of it, is the Magic and the Wonder as well. I was looking at pictures. They just have better adult areas. The pool is a little bigger. There's like more space. Again, it's because they hadn't figured out exactly how to max min their space. Like the Wish notoriously has lost a lot of the adult only pool space for actually concierge space. So they're max minning something else there. And so the adult space in the Magic and on the Magic and the Wonder, they just feel like there's a lot more of chairs, a lot more space to utilize. The bar is good. The Magic, Wonder, Dream, and Fantasy, they all have kind of adults only-ish district where all the bars and the, not clubs, but lounges are all mostly concentrated there. The Wish, they started like spreading those out as well. And I really like the feel, and this isn't just Magic class specific since the Dream and Fantasy have it, but I like the feel of having all those adult areas, those lounges and bars all together. We went, oh, quick tip, or at least something I didn't know about, was at O'Gill's, which is one of the bars, they served late night food, like a small late night buffet for an hour from 10:45 to 11:45 each night. And in one of the other lounges, there was a magician doing a show, and then they were showing that on TV there. So we could do that with late night, and that was really good. So that's the adult areas. And Leslie, what's our third reason you might want to try one of the Magic class ships?
On average, you might have better destinations, more exciting destinations. And Disney is doing this purposefully, right? They know that the new ships have a draw in and of themselves. People want to try the ship that's new. So they're putting the older ships on the places that are more exciting and exotic to visit. So, of course, I mean, the Wonder, for example, is still the ship that's sailing Alaska. And if you want to do that, you're going to be on one of the older ships. And so you might just get like a little bit more like you were able to experience Lookout Cay because you were on the Magic. So yeah, there's a trade-off there. You can only get some things new in one sailing.
Yeah, I was talking to a Magic cast member, and I didn't get a chance to confirm this, but he was like, basically, we're the only ones going to Lookout Cay until next year, like until like late spring or something. And so if you're sailing in the near future, yeah, definitely you're going to have to sail on the Magic to get there. The Wonder, of course, goes to Alaska. It goes to Australia. All the more exciting destinations, like basically the non Bahamian, Nassau, Castaway, or Western Caribbean, Eastern Caribbean, which, they're great cruises, but they're just not as, like you said, they're just putting the more exciting destinations on the older ships to try to get you on the older ships. Oh, the other thing we didn't say is typically the older ships are cheaper. Alaska obviously doesn't count, but on like a normal itinerary, on average, the Magic class ships are going to be cheaper. Now, reasons you may want to consider avoiding the older ships, or at least reasons that you should consider when you're deciding whether you want to do the older ship or not. Wear and tear on the ship noise, vibration. When we were eating dinner in Palo, which was in the aft, it's not that our silverware is shaking or anything like that, but I felt like just a constant minor vibration just in my seat the entire time. You were on the Wonder pretty recently. I mean, what was your experience with ship noise, vibration, stuff like that?
Yeah, we definitely had a little bit of that as well. I mean, just like you say, older ship and things are. I mean, we have to say these ships have been renovated since they have come out. It's not like they're like aging and they look old and dingy and things like that. But technology has improved in the last, I don't know, 20, 30 years. So, something to think about.
Yeah, I think the vibrations are just, those are kind of macro level engine, like they didn't even replace the engines. They, refurbish them or oil them or whatever, right? And so that's what creates the vibrations. I remember when I was on the Wonder, we were like aft, and this was in 2022, when the side thrusters, like basically when we were docking, it sounded like there was a mini hammer inside our toilet. And so that was really loud. And so, you're going to have these things. This was probably the first ship, I've been on the Wonder relatively recently. This was the first ship where in our room, I was like, oh, that's a stain in the bathtub that's not coming out. It looked like cleaning colored stain, not like a dirty stain, but still, I was like, oh, that's not coming out. Those kinds of things, minor issues. These are quibbles, but at the same time, you're spending thousands of dollars. You should know that it is an older ship. I wouldn't say that it feels dated. It doesn't feel dated. It still feels really nice, but there are just some minor issues here and there that you might have to deal with. Next reason you might not want to go to the older ships. The pool deck, the adult pool is better, but the main pool area is much smaller. There's much smaller pool space. The Wish especially was impressive to me with the amount of different pools that they had and the amount of different areas you could watch the funnel vision from. On the Magic and the Wonder, it's just like a lot more limited. It's a smaller ship as well, so that's a big part of it, but that's something to bear in mind. I think I said this on my Wish review, that it did not feel like kids soup in the pools, where it was just like a ton of kids just piled into the pools. Like it felt like an adult could actually go in there and just chill out and not be surrounded by a million kids. On the Magic, it doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, and we should add to this. I mean, this may matter to you if you're going on summertime sailing to the Caribbean, but if you're on the Wonder in Alaska, you're not going to be at the pool. So, this is not a negative at all. This really depends on the itinerary and whether you're going to be using the pool a lot on the sailing. And to me, this is just a completely non-issue if you're going on an itinerary that's sort of a colder destination or colder months or something like that. Definitely that take advantage of the lower prices of these ships.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And it was weird because I felt like the pool was closed on the Magic more than I thought it would be. So it was like just not available at times, especially the Aquadunk and the Twist and Spout, the other slide. They definitely felt closed more often than I thought. Just when the Wish was, the Aqua Mouse on the Wish was open 9 a.m. to 6, 7, 8, 9 p.m. every single day, including on Nassau and stuff like that. I was hoping to do the Aquadunk on Nassau on the Magic, but it didn't open until 2 p.m. And so I was like, oh no, sorry, that was on Castaway Cay. But still, I was like, I can't do my hang out on the pool in the morning thing and go to Castaway Cay in the afternoon thing that I did on the Wish. So the pools were closed more often than I thought. And then I wish I had paid attention. Like I didn't pay attention to when the pools were open on the Wonder because I was in Alaska. I wasn't getting in those pools, as you said. So that's another thing to think about and to bear in mind. The last thing to mention, I felt a lot of motion on this cruise and the seas did not look that rough. And I was looking it up. Smaller ships, you're going to feel the movement more. So if you are worried about motion sickness, we always say be midship, lower decks, but on the smaller ships, you may want to be even more careful. I really felt this. I actually ended up going to 0 shows because the Walt Disney Theater is in the front. And every night at dinner, that's when they started like really revving up the engines. And I was like, I'd rather not. I just watched it on TV instead.
Yeah, that's a bummer. And this is something if you haven't cruised before, you're not going to know necessarily if you're going to be somebody subject to motion sickness. I mean, maybe somewhat, but cruise motion is different motion than car motion, different than airplane motion. So people feel it differently. I definitely felt like we had a lot of motion on the Wonder the last night of our sailing down to the Mexican Riviera. What?
The last night, the last
Yeah.
nights on all these cruises are always like, because you've done all, you didn't do Alaska, but you take the inside passage up, right? But that last night, you're pretty far from your home port and they just rev it up. So
They're
yeah.
booking it. They're booking it. And we also, I mean, we were in the open Pacific on that Mexican Riviera cruise. So it depends a lot. You have to think too about where you're cruising and whether it's more likely to be smooth. And if I do take this Magic cruise at Thanksgiving, it's out of Galveston down to Grand Cayman and Cozumel. So we'll see whether that's a little bit smoother compared to the open Pacific. But, of course, weather comes up at any time and you don't know how that's going to necessarily affect your sailing and you can't plan for that.
Yeah, I think what really shocked me or surprised me about the Magic and feeling the motion more, because when I was on the Wonder, like I said, most of our days were on the inside passage. So we had that one day at the end, but besides that, I didn't really feel the ship much at all. What surprised me about the Magic was the weather was like beautiful. It was like just a few clouds. In fact, really cool. I guess we did end up going through a thunderstorm one night. I woke up and I saw thunder outside, but there was this, it was really just enjoyable. When you're looking across the sea and the horizon, you don't know how far things are. Well, there was a thunderstorm like in the distance, like in the horizon, and I was just watching lightning strikes, but it was obviously like way far enough away, although it did seem like there was a royal ship pretty close to it, but it seemed far enough away. And so, yeah, there was thunder all the way out over there, but where we were, it was like perfectly calm looking oceans and the weather was beautiful. And it's like, why am I still feeling the ship move like this? So just something to bear in mind, especially if you're worried about motion sickness, maybe start with one of the larger ships. All right, so that breaks down our thoughts on why you should or maybe should not consider sailing on the Magic class of ships. I will reiterate, they still are beautiful. I still think the Wonder is my favorite ship. Maybe it's just because it's the first one I did, as I always said, Leslie. And so, definitely don't ignore these older ships just because they're older. There's a lot of value to be had there. And I didn't say this, but just the fact that everything's more compact and you kind of don't have to go very far to go with everything just makes the ship feel more intimate in like a good way and in an enjoyable way. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah, definitely. Good point, Joe. Why don't we close this out with our traditional Disney do or don't?
My Disney do, I may have said this before, but I'm sorry, it's a Disney don't. Don't have a super rigid plan when you're on Disney Cruise Line. Maybe just do the opposite of what you would do at Walt Disney World. There are just so many things to do. You can check it out on your navigator, on your app. You can see what there is and then just go with the flow. I found that, we were traveling with a big group. So at times there were more amongst the kids, but at times there was like conflict about who wants to do this or that, things like that. You don't really need to worry about that. It's just not worth it. Just go with the flow, enjoy it. Don't be too rigid about what you want to do. If you don't get to do everything, it doesn't matter. 9 times out of 10, what you end up doing instead is going to be just as fun and just as good. So just relax. Okay. These cruises are supposed to be relaxing unless you're on the Disney Dream in Europe, in which case you better be waking up at 6 a.m. to get to those excursions in Florence and Athens or wherever.
That's right. That's right. Well said, Joe.
All right, well, that does it. Let us know your thoughts on the Magic and the Wonder, the Magic class ships, what you enjoy or don't like about them. DisneyDeciphered@gmail.com, at WWDeciphered on Twitter or on Instagram, DisneyDeciphered. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And other than that, Leslie, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. And I will see you contacting your travel agent about whether you're going to cancel that cruise or not.
Thanks, Joe.